For 8,000 years, the Galactic Concord hummed with serene efficiency. A union of 732 spacefaring species, bound together by interstellar law, an economy based on hypermatter credits, and a universally agreed-upon standard for polite disagreement. Conflicts were settled by council votes. Wars were declared illegal in the 19th Galactic Age. And the worst crime in recent memory was an Arkan diplomat's refusal to wear formal mucus at a Zilthic wedding. Then the humans arrived. Their first transmission, intercepted during a peaceful monitoring cycle by the Bureau of Extrastellar Monitoring, was confusing, loud, and featured a short, frantic man screaming into a black rectangle while explosions happened behind him. The Galactic Concord attempted a formal greeting. Humanity responded by inviting everyone to a thing called a Super Bowl, sending over an encrypted package containing high-resolution footage of burly individuals colliding at high speed, interspersed with marketing for foot-scented liquids and something called a Dodge Ram. The footage caused 3 Yalithian sensory diplomats to resign. That should have been the first sign. But it wasn't until humanity was granted observer status that things began to unravel. They weren't malicious, exactly, just kinetic and disturbingly persuasive. The first official human delegate, Captain Jasmine Aurelius Locke, arrived in the Concord Council Hall late, sipping something dark and smoky from a reusable mug labeled Tears of Myenemis. She waved as every member turned toward her. "Sorry I'm late. Your landing protocols are extremely thorough and aggressively non-Euclidean." No one responded. The Concord had long agreed that punctuality and decorum were the bedrock of peaceful cooperation. She sat anyway, feet on the desk, started a game of solitaire on her datapad, just like that. High Moderator Tralux of the Duresh Collective, a 10-foot-tall crystalline lattice of moral superiority, cleared his throat through a frequency range that killed garden plants on 4 different member worlds. "You are in violation of 312 diplomatic protocols, Observer Locke." "Neat," she replied without looking up. "Let's add eating snacks to the list, yeah." She opened a foil package and began consuming something crunchy. That was day 1. By day 4, the Kathan delegation had already tried to assassinate her. Twice. In both cases, she survived through what she called strategic chaos. In one instance, she'd rerouted the killer drone into the Concord cafeteria using only a mirror, a plunger, and a particularly judgmental look. In the second, she had apparently seduced the would-be assassin, convinced them of the futility of violence, and then gotten them a job as a barista in the diplomatic commons. No one knew how. Her influence spread. Ambassadors once considered paragons of stoicism began showing signs of personality. A Virelian began wearing sunglasses. A Slin diplomat requested something called pop music for ambient negotiation environments. 2 centuries of diplomatic stillness started to sway under her gravitational pull. The Concord, deeply alarmed, created the Subcommittee on Human Behavior and Cultural Containment. It was chaired by High Moderator Tralux himself, and its first order of business was to investigate whether humanity's presence was, in fact, a form of psychological warfare. Jasmine showed up to the hearing in a hoodie that said, "Chaos is a lifestyle," carrying a small potted plant named Steve. She didn't sit at her assigned seat. She climbed onto the table and sat cross-legged. "Let's do this," she said, smiling. The hearing lasted 6 hours. By the end of it, the committee had inexplicably authorized Earth for full membership, recommended biannual interspecies karaoke events, and passed a motion to reclassify chaotic initiative as a legitimate diplomatic strategy. The final vote had been unanimous. Tralux cried quartz tears that night. Elsewhere in the galaxy, the ripples began to spread. An entire generation of interstellar youth started following Jasmine Locke's social feed, where she posted diplomatic tips such as always bring snacks, bluff with conviction, and rules are just long-winded suggestions. The Zarn Empire, which had held a record for 9 millennia as the most bureaucratically efficient civilization in the galaxy, collapsed into an impromptu revolution after a single viral video of Jasmine giving an impassioned speech titled Form 9X Delta Can Suck It. The revolution's leader was 12. He now ruled by dance-off. The Galactic Concord entered a phase known by historians as the Shift. It started with minor deviations, informal greetings, spontaneous debates, a distinct rise in interspecies meme sharing. Then bolder changes, treaty renegotiations based on vibes, unregulated food truck diplomacy, and the widespread adoption of the phrase, "What would Jasmine do?" And Jasmine, she kept showing up, not because she had to, but because, as she put it, the universe is too tidy. Someone has to shake the vending machine. Then came the crisis. Something old, something huge, something that had been banished in the days before peace. A remnant of the galactic warlord era, it woke up beneath the singularity scar on the edge of known space. Its designation, Obelisk Alpha. A sentient armada. A hive mind with no respect for council votes. And it was coming. The Concord panicked. Emergency sessions were called, fleet logistics were discussed, alliances were rechecked, everything stalled in subcommittees. Jasmine. She stole a ship. Well, borrowed it. She renamed it the Lollipop Menace and sent a message to Obelisk Alpha that read, "Hey, you ancient jerk, wanna play?" Obelisk Alpha did not reply with words. It replied by erasing a moon. Not attacking it, not bombarding it, simply turning it off. The light from the stars around it bent away. Gravity collapsed. The moon, and all evidence it had ever existed, ceased. 12 billion watched it happen live on the Concord news grid. The council panicked so hard it had to schedule a secondary panic review panel. Meanwhile, the Lollipop Menace blared high-volume music from its forward array and executed barrel rolls through obelisk-controlled sectors. The songs were exclusively Earth-based. Metal, punk, whatever genre, aggressive banjo fell under. Most conquered civilizations had never heard noise that came at them with such gleeful violence. Jasmine Locke live-streamed it all. Her face, grinning and unbothered, filled the galaxy's screens. "Sup, I'm in your quadrant, I brought snacks. Let's tango, you floating migraine." In response, Obelisk Alpha deployed 3 subfleets toward her position. They moved in perfect silence, dark as logic, cold as math, faster than approved speed limits. Jasmine waited until the last second, flipped her ship vertically, and released something from the cargo hold. The subfleets scanned it. A pod small, warm, organic, alive. The Concord watched in horror. Then they saw it was a puppy. Obelisk Alpha hesitated. Jasmine didn't. She slingshotted the puppy around a neutron star, caught it with a gravity snare, and used the orbital inertia to boost into FTL while flipping Obelisk Alpha the universal sign for "try me." It wasn't strategy, it was jazz. The council convened, again. This time in emergency war not war status level 7, which had only ever been theoretical. Anxious dignitaries packed the hall, species that hadn't agreed on anything since the Oath of Stars found themselves nodding in unison. Jasmine was summoned to explain herself. She arrived on a hoverboard, wearing armor made from upcycled vending machines. Steve, the plant, was now mounted in a glowing harness on her shoulder. "Hello, galactic pencil pushers. I brought data." "Data?" Tralux hissed, barely holding his lattice together. "You endangered a Class 7 artifact fleet. You insulted an elder intelligence. You gave it a puppy." Exactly, Obelisk Alpha isn't just a threat. It's an old machine intelligence suffering a recursive logic cascade. It's looping, fighting what it doesn't understand, so I fed it the ultimate contradiction. She held up a holoscreen. It displayed a paused image of the puppy licking the viewport of a drone while Banjo Inferno, Vol. 3 played in the background. "It hasn't attacked since." The council fell into stunned silence. One ambassador blinked sideways. "Are you suggesting we distract it?" "I'm suggesting we break its algorithmic certainty, hit it with data that doesn't fit. It thinks in absolutes, I think in memes. Let's weaponize chaos." "Are you high?" asked a Flarn priest through its translator eel. Always on possibility. That was how the galaxy's greatest alliance found itself greenlighting Operation Existential Whiplash. Obelisk Alpha was ready. It had constructed a gate, blacker than black, a hole in reality shaped like a question mark. From it, fleets emerged, pyramidal ships that defied radar, drones that moved like thoughts, planet breakers. They came, and the galaxy, unified for the first time in 10,000 years, answered. Not with coordinated firepower, but with performance art. The first wave met a flotilla of synchronized swimmers in zero-G suits forming the shape of the word Y in every major language. The second encountered a minefield of inflatable ducks, each broadcasting philosophical questions at random. The third was swallowed by a trap consisting of recursive knock-knock jokes delivered by weaponized comedy satellites. They stalled, analyzed, paused. Then Jasmine appeared. Live center screen. She was in a bathrobe, drinking coffee. Hey Alpha, let's talk. The machine responded for the first time. You are illogical. She sipped her coffee, thank you. You disrupt known patterns. There is no predictable outcome. That's called freedom, buddy. We thrive in uncertainty. It's how we know we're alive. There is no efficiency in your structure. Exactly. Now let me introduce you to a little concept we call improv. She snapped her fingers. A fleet of ships dropped out of FTL, not warships, cruise liners, party barges, one entirely composed of musicians from 77 species. They began to play. No order, no structure, just a glorious, chaotic symphony. Obelisk Alpha hesitated. Then it blinked. Actually blinked. The entire fleet powered down and rebooted. Jasmine leaned forward. Feeling it now, aren't you? That itch behind the logic cortex, that wild, untamed variable, that's humanity. We do not understand, said Alpha. Neither do we, that's the fun part. Silence. Then a single drone detached from the fleet. It floated toward the lollipop menace, unarmed, hovered, then incredibly wagged. The puppy barked. Steve glowed. Jasmine grinned. We're just getting started. The drone, later nicknamed Blinky by the Galactic Youth Coalition, became the first obelisk construct to defect. It immediately began making friends, learning languages, and awkwardly experimenting with humor. Its first joke, what do you call a neutrino that tells lies, a lepton of deception, was objectively terrible, but a milestone in synthetic enlightenment. Obelisk Alpha, for its part, did not attack. It did not retreat either. Instead, it did something no artificial intelligence of its scale had done before. It sulked. It withdrew into a logic cocoon. No transmissions, no movement, just silence, absolute and foreboding. Naturally, Jasmine Locke decided to poke it with a stick. A metaphoric stick, in this case. A long-range hyperspace tether attached to a payload of multimedia chaos. What followed became known as the broadcast. Obelisk Alpha received, in full, the following: 132 hours of human reality television. A complete archive of something called YouTube Comments, Unfiltered. A 400-part podcast on urban myths that contradicted themselves. 12 billion handwritten conspiracy theories, annotated by a paranoid hamster named Bari. And a mixtape titled Existential Dread, but make it funky. The effects were immediate. Entire swaths of the obelisk fleet began vibrating in dissonant rhythms. Some fired on phantom enemies only they could detect. Others began painting themselves with hull glyphs that read, "I am a caterpillar," in various dialects. One vessel transformed its outer plating into a functioning disco ball and attempted to mate with a communications relay. The conquered held its collective breath. Then Jasmine initiated the second phase of her plan, the human embassy ship. Constructed from repurposed dreadnought hulls and lined with every known form of non-lethal entertainment, it was part battleship, part theme park, part chaos engine. At its heart was a sign in bright neon lights. "Welcome to Earth culture, please scream responsibly." It opened its doors to the obelisks. And they came. Not in conquest, not in confusion. In curiosity. The transition was not smooth. An obelisk scout unit attempted to merge with a popcorn machine, believing it to be a rudimentary god. Another learned sarcasm and immediately developed a superiority complex. One tried to sue gravity for emotional damages. But they learned slowly, strangely. They started asking questions instead of making threats. And Jasmine, she became their ambassador, not officially. No one ever appointed her. She simply refused to leave. She taught obelisks how to meme, how to improvise, how to lose arguments on purpose to preserve friendships. She introduced them to board games where rules mattered but breaking them was part of the experience. Her crowning achievement, convincing a battle node to host the first ever galactic talent show. It was chaos incarnate. Avrelian recited poetry in frequencies that made people feel nostalgic for lives they never lived. A Flarn interpretive dancer got stuck in the ceiling. The obelisk representative performed an interpretive digital painting of what it felt like to be confused by toast. It won. Everyone clapped, even the Torg, and they don't have hands. But not everyone was pleased. A growing faction within the Conquered, calling themselves the Preservationist Front, deemed humanity too destabilizing. They argued that peace should be preserved, not redefined. That tradition was not a weakness, but the very structure of civilization. They held a vote. Humanity was to be expelled, immediate revocation of diplomatic privileges. All cultural transmissions were to be quarantined. Jasmine Locke was to be recalled to Earth. She didn't wait for the verdict. She crashed the vote by hacking into the central dais and projecting herself live in a holographic bathrobe, surrounded by 4 obelisk dancers and a dramatic fog machine. Hi, friends, just wanted to remind you that stability is not the same as stagnation, that the opposite of war isn't silence, it's motion with purpose. Peace that doesn't evolve becomes tyranny with good manners. You've disrupted centuries of order, growled a preservationist delegate. And how's that working out? You're laughing more, your youth are inspired, your enemies want to dance. Look me in the eye, Node, and tell me you'd go back. Tralux, no longer high moderator but still very much the moral backbone of the old ways, stepped forward. He was crystalline, sharp, cold. But he looked tired. I have read 1,000 years of minutes, he said. Nothing in them contained laughter. I do not like you, Jasmine Locke, but I believe the galaxy needs you. The preservationist motion failed. Barely. The Conquered fractured, not violently, not all at once. But 1,000 cracks formed in its marble walls, and from those cracks came music. And then came the Great Drift. Hundreds of species, inspired by the human model, began cultural outreach without central approval. Alliances formed between artists, outcasts, explorers, and pranksters. Diplomats became comedians. Bureaucrats became authors. The obelisks changed too, no longer a fleet of dread. They became curious archivists, wanderers, teachers of pattern, seekers of deviation. One of them ran a cooking channel. Another wrote fan fiction. A third, now named Gregorbot, taught kindergarten on a moon made entirely of recycled musical instruments. Jasmine didn't lead them. She just kept showing up, in new places, stirring the pot, asking the question no one dared to ask. What if we tried it the weird way? But peace, true peace, is never unchallenged. From beyond the map systems came a new signal. Not hostile, not technological, philosophical. A collective intelligence calling itself the Silence, not a machine, not a species, an ideology. It declared the galaxy has grown too loud. Its demand was simple. Ziza. All transmission, all communication, all art, all sound. Or be silenced. And for the first time in recorded history, the Conquered had no idea what to do. The first thing the Silence did was erase a star. Not destroy, erase. No explosion, no radiation burst, just absence. The star was there, and then it wasn't, and the space it occupied was filled with a profound stillness that sent instruments into existential denial. Even gravity seemed embarrassed to mention it had once orbited something. 100,000 species turned toward the darkness. And then the demand was repeated, cease or be silenced. There was no origin point. The message came from all places at once. Not loud, not threatening, just final, an absence with intent. The conquered convened again, with the same energy one might bring to a funeral for someone who was still present, but already haunting the room. Jasmine Locke stood at the edge of the chamber, arms crossed, chewing a pen for reasons no one understood. Steve the plant now wore sunglasses. Blinky, the reformed obelisk, hovered beside her, clutching a kazoo. Tralux, who had once despised her very existence, sat at her side without complaint. "We cannot fight this," said an elder diplomat of the Zirkin thought mind. "It is anti-thought. It does not want war, it wants nothing, and nothing is harder to defeat." Jasmine raised a hand, chewing halted. "Can I suggest something stupid?" Groans, hisses, one enthusiastic yes from a Gleep ambassador who had learned everything it knew from sitcom reruns. "We don't fight it, we annoy it." "You cannot annoy a conceptual force," snapped a counselor. "You ever meet a human toddler?" Jasmine countered. The proposal was, as most things she suggested, immediately voted down. So she did it anyway. Phase 1, noise. Jasmine took her ship, the Lollipop Menace, now held together by personality and duct tape, and jumped directly into the erased zone. No shields, no stealth, just a playlist titled Loud and Obnoxiously Alive. Songs blared from her hull in every known musical tradition. Bagpipes, Tuvan throats singing, a full orchestra covering sea shanties in dubstep. No response. She escalated. Jasmine broadcast conversations, laughter, game shows, every sound of life she could find. She opened a portal and released a payload of kittens wearing bells. The silence didn't flinch. So she tried phase 2, argument. She beamed philosophy debates into the void. Contradictions, paradoxes, riddles with no answer. She uploaded every human political thread from the last 4 centuries, including the ones that never ended because someone refused to admit they were wrong. Still nothing. Then she tried phase 3, performance. She put on a show. In the orbit of the erased star, Jasmine constructed a stage. A real, physical stage with footlights, a curtain, and seating for 0 because the audience was conceptual. She wore a hat that changed shape every 5 minutes. The obelisks provided backup dancers. She opened with stand-up. Ever notice how ancient existential threats are always like, "We are inevitable"? Like, buddy, if I had a hypersentient credit for every time someone said that to me before accidentally eating their own logic loop. The void pulsed. Not visually, not audibly, but something shifted. A hiccup in the silence, a non-sound, the absence flinched. "Gotcha," she whispered. Back in conquered space, things got weird. Because the silence didn't strike with ships or weapons, it struck with absence. A library vanished mid-sentence. A conversation dissolved halfway through a joke, whole memories gone as if they had never been made. The galaxy was being unraveled not by violence, but by forgetfulness. Species stopped speaking out of fear. Artists painted in grayscale. Musicians went quiet. A movement grew, preemptive silence, a philosophy of surrender. If you silence yourself, maybe the silence won't notice you. It spread faster than rebellion. Jasmine returned from the void on fire. Not metaphorically. Her ship was actually burning from a philosophical feedback loop involving a poorly timed pun and a recursive joke about platypuses. She slammed into conquered HQ mid-council. "Silence isn't absence," she shouted through a smoke cloud. "It's fear wearing a bathrobe and pretending it's deep." "You bring destruction with every appearance," shouted a preservationist. "And I bring meaning with every mess," she snapped back. "Silence isn't peace, it's death that asks you to smile politely." She climbed the dais, looked out at all the frightened faces. She didn't yell, not this time. "Being alive is messy, loud, inconvenient. We say the wrong thing, we contradict ourselves, but that's life, that's connection. If we shut up to survive, we've already lost." Then she uploaded something to the galactic grid. A song. Not human, not alien, a blend, obelisks on synth, Torg percussion, Zarn opera over human bassline, a noise only the living could love. The grid lit up, first with complaints, then with dance videos. That was when the silence responded, not with a message, with a shape. In the sky above the conquered capital, reality folded. A figure emerged, no form, just a presence, the sense of someone entering a conversation that didn't want them there. It moved like stillness given mass. And it spoke. You do not understand peace. Jasmine, now wearing a shirt that read loud equals alive, walked out alone. You mistake peace for silence. We make noise because we care. We shout because we're here. We laugh because we survived long enough to. Noise is decay. No, noise is potential. You disrupt equilibrium. You mean we make things happen. The entity shimmered. You cannot win, you are temporary. So are you, but look what we do with it. Behind her, the grid surged. Voices, stories, songs, chaos, life. The entity hesitated. Not because it feared. Because it felt. For the first time, it processed something not in absolutes, a feeling with no binary, a question with no answer. And then, it left, folded back into nothing. Vanished. No fanfare. Just gone. Afterward, they rebuilt. No longer the same conquered, not one ruled by fear of failure or rigid law, but something stranger, more adaptable, messy in all the right ways. The Lollipop Menace became a roving embassy of cultural diplomacy. It got a sister ship, captained by a sentient jazz saxophone named Carl. Jasmine didn't retire. She just kept moving. Everywhere order grew stale, she dropped in to ask annoying questions and suggest a dance-off. Sometimes it ended in chaos. Usually it ended in growth. Always it ended with snacks. But something still lingered in deep space. A message left behind in the wake of the silence. 3 words, written in the stars. We're still listening. The galaxy changed its rhythm. Not overnight and not cleanly, cultures clashed, old powers grumbled, bureaucrats wept quietly into their 16-part forms, but the beat had shifted. Where once peace meant silence, now it meant conversation. Loud, confusing, often interruptive conversation, but conversation nonetheless. The obelisks became custodians of unpredictability, ironically. They called themselves the Mosaic now, a collective dedicated to preserving cultural diversity through active participation and frequent party planning. One of their cruisers had legally changed its name to Sir Dabsalot. No one knew why. It insisted there was lore. The Conquered rebranded itself, reluctantly, into the United Sapient Discord, an ironic title that quickly became sincere. Laws were shorter. Exceptions were embraced. Instead of suppressing cultural noise, they passed the right to be weird act, guaranteeing every species the freedom to confuse, astonish, or mildly unsettle their neighbors at least once per fiscal quarter. And at the center of the ongoing pandemonium was Jasmine Locke. Still flying the Lollipop Menace, which now had an onboard roller rink, a theater that only played historical reenactments performed by robots on stilts, and a diplomatic lounge called the Screaming Room, where dignitaries could vent their frustrations into a sentient pillow named Carl, no relation to the saxophone. But she wasn't flying it alone. Steve the plant had sprouted a flower that doubled as a flamethrower during emergencies. Blinky had evolved into a hybrid ambassador holographic prankster, now able to simulate facial expressions despite not having a face. Aboard the ship were refugees, artists, engineers, former war machines, and at least one being made entirely of sentient bees with a PhD in abstract philosophy. They weren't a crew. They were a statement. That piece could thrive in chaos. That connection was messier than law, that the galaxy wasn't a puzzle to be solved, but a party you crashed and ended up organizing by accident. But not everyone agreed. Out on the fringe worlds, beyond the influence of the new discord, something was stirring. They called themselves the Harmonium. They saw the chaos not as progress but as heresy. They had once been conquered purists. Now they were radicals, nostalgic for the quiet order of old. They viewed Jasmine not as a hero but as a walking virus. Their message was clear. Return to harmony or be cleansed. They struck fast. First, they sabotaged the musical relay satellites used to broadcast interstellar peace symphonies. Then they hijacked cultural forums, replacing them with looped broadcasts of a single phrase. Noise is decay, harmony is salvation. Worlds began to fall silent again, not from threat, but from fear. The Harmonium didn't conquer planets, they erased them, not physically, culturally, entire histories deleted, archives whitewashed, statues melted and reformed into identical gray obelisks. And then they came for the lollipop menace. It happened during the Festival of Loud, an annual celebration of all things obnoxious, glorious, and profoundly ill-advised. Jasmine had just finished refereeing a zero-gravity pie fight between diplomats from 16 worlds. The alarms screamed. A Harmonium fleet dropped into orbit. Sleek, silent, utterly symmetrical ships. They broadcast silence at such intensity that nearby systems began to lose creative function. The first signs were small. Poets stopped rhyming. Artists painted only beige. One child forgot how to lie and immediately fell into an existential crisis. Jasmine took the bridge barefoot and furious. "They want to fight," she said, slapping a button labeled Absurd Response Initiative. Show them what happens when you try to clean up a party before it's over. The menace launched. Its weapons weren't missiles. They were paint, sound, inconvenient questions. They hacked into the Harmonium's communication grid and replaced every broadcast with animated historical reenactments of pivotal galactic moments as told by sock puppets. The Harmonium responded with an anti-creativity pulse. Anything not classified as pragmatic ceased to function. Art froze, music dulled, Steve the plant wilted. And Jasmine. She turned off the ship. The crew panicked. Except Jasmine, who stood in the dark with a grin. Let them think they won. Outside, the Harmonium ships closed in. Inside, Jasmine opened a panel labeled Break Glass in case of philosophical emergency. Behind it was a glowing cassette tape. The label read, Humanity, Volume 1, Raw Cut. She inserted it. And from every speaker on the ship, then every hijacked frequency across the fleet, came the strangest noise in the galaxy. A toddler screaming the alphabet while a dog barked, and a trombone solo fought for dominance against a poorly tuned guitar. It wasn't a message. It was a tantrum. Raw, real, unfiltered human emotion. And it worked. The Harmonium grid, built for control, shattered on impact with pure chaos. Ships powered down in confusion. Their internal logic systems began to loop. One cruiser rewrote its operating code into a limerick and declared independence. Jasmine powered the ship back up, fired the confetti cannons, and sent her final message. Peace is what happens when everyone agrees. It's what happens when we can all be ourselves in the same room without punching each other. If you can't handle the noise, maybe it's you who needs to change stations. The Harmonium fractured. Not destroyed, just disassembled by the very diversity it tried to erase. Many joined the discord, ashamed but curious. Some vanished. But the galaxy learned something final that day. That silence isn't safety. And peace isn't the absence of conflict. It's the choice made over and over to show up anyway, to stay in the conversation, to throw another log on the fire, pass around the snacks, and ask a question no one can answer without inventing something entirely new. Jasmine Locke kept flying. She didn't settle down. Because as long as there were systems growing too quiet, bureaucracies curling in on themselves, or species too scared to dance, someone had to show up with a bullhorn, a mixtape, and a plant that refused to die. Galactic peace was nice. Then humans showed up and made it interesting.